What if the one place a child is supposed to feel safest becomes the most dangerous? In the quiet suburbs of Lawrenceville, Georgia, a horrifying discovery in November 2013 shattered the community's sense of security. 10-year-old Imani Moss was found dead, her emaciated body burned and discarded in a trash can. This was not the result of a sudden, unthinkable act, but the culmination of years of abuse and neglect, a tragic narrative hidden behind closed doors. Imani's father, Iman Moss, and her stepmother, Tiffany Moss, were at the center of this harrowing case. While the full extent of their involvement would unfold in the ensuing investigation, initial reports painted a grim picture of a child failed by those she trusted most. This isn't merely a story about a crime. It's an indictment of a system that overlooked the signs, allowing a young girl's suffering to persist unnoticed. As we delve into the life and death of Imani Moss, we confront unsettling questions about familial betrayal and systemic failure. How did a child, known to welfare services and the community, endure such profound neglect? What warning signs were missed, and what can be done to prevent such tragedies in the future? Welcome to That Police Officer, where we delve into true crime stories from a law enforcement perspective. If you're new here, we analyze cases, discuss investigative procedures, and provide insights into the criminal justice system. Subscribe now to stay informed and join our community. Imani Gabrielle Moss was a vibrant and affectionate 10-year-old girl who possessed a natural zest for life. She had a deep love for ballet and guitar, often immersing herself in these activities with enthusiasm. Her teachers and peers at Bethesda Elementary School in Lawrenceville fondly remember her as a compassionate friend who extended kindness to everyone, even those who were unkind to her. Her fourth-grade teacher, Lisa Neal, described Imani as precious and a blessing to have in my classroom. Imani's face would light up when she spoke about her baby brother, reflecting the immense love she had for her family. Born to a mother battling drug addiction, Imani faced challenges from the very beginning. Her biological mother was largely absent, leading her father, Iman Moss, to take on the primary caregiving role. Iman worked diligently to provide for his daughter, and for a time, it seemed that Imani had a stable foundation despite early adversities. However, this stability began to wane when Iman remarried. His new wife, Tiffany Moss, initially appeared to be a nurturing addition to the family. Yet, behind the closed doors of their home, a different and troubling reality was unfolding. The Moss family resided in Gwinnett County, Georgia, a suburban area northeast of Atlanta. Known for its diversity, Gwinnett County is the second most populous county in the state, with a population of 957,062 as of 2020. Despite its bustling communities and outward appearance of normalcy, the county, like many others, harbored secrets of domestic turmoil hidden behind suburban facades. To outsiders, the Moss family seemed typical. Neighbors and acquaintances saw Iman as a hard-working father and Tiffany as a stay-at-home mother caring for Imani and her two younger siblings. However, within the walls of their apartment, Imani was enduring severe neglect and abuse that would ultimately lead to her tragic demise. The signs of trouble began to surface early. Teachers at Bethesda Elementary noticed alarming changes in Imani's appearance and behavior. She appeared malnourished, often hungry, and displayed a fearful demeanor. In 2010, concerns escalated when reports emerged that Tiffany had beaten Imani with a belt, leaving visible injuries. This incident led to Tiffany pleading guilty to child cruelty charges, resulting in probation. Despite these red flags, Imani remained in the household. Georgia's Division of Family and Children's Services, DFCS, had multiple interactions with the Moss family. Their involvement began as early as 2003, when Imani was just 1 year old, following reports of neglect and inadequate care. Subsequent investigations in 2005 and 2008 addressed concerns of emotional neglect and possible sexual abuse. However, each case was deemed unsubstantiated, and no significant actions were taken to remove Imani from her home. These missed opportunities for intervention highlight a critical failure in the system designed to protect vulnerable children. Despite clear indicators of abuse and neglect, Imani was continually returned to an environment that proved fatal. Her story underscores the devastating consequences that can arise when warning signs are overlooked, and the voices of the most vulnerable go unheard. In the months leading up to October 2013, 10-year-old Imani Moss endured unimaginable suffering within the confines of her family's apartment. Subjected to prolonged starvation by her stepmother, Tiffany Moss, Imani was confined to her bedroom, deprived of food, and isolated from the outside world. Neighbors, unaware of her presence, only observed Tiffany's biological children, oblivious to the silent torment occurring just beyond their walls. As the weeks progressed, Imani's condition deteriorated drastically. She became too weak to perform basic functions, unable to leave her bed, and lost control over her bodily functions. While Imani wasted away in solitude, Tiffany continued to care for and feed her own children, even sending images of prepared meals to her husband, Iman Moss. In a particularly cruel act, she baked cookies, forcing Imani to endure the aroma of food she was denied. Medical examiner Dr. Staffenberg later testified that the process of starvation is excruciatingly painful, beginning with intense hunger pangs, followed by extreme fatigue, and culminating in the body's gradual shutdown. On the evening of October 24, 2013, Imani suffered a seizure. Iman returned home to find her unresponsive in the bathtub, her eyes rolling back. Despite her critical state, she was moved to her bed without medical intervention. Over the next few days, Iman attempted to feed her, but Imani was too weak to eat. She succumbed to starvation on October 28, 2013, weighing a mere 32 pounds, the average weight of a 3-year-old child. In the aftermath, rather than seeking help or reporting Imani's death, Tiffany and Iman conspired to conceal the crime. Moss purchased new bedding to replace those soiled during Imani's decline. Iman acquired a galvanized trash can, trash bags, charcoal, and lighter fluid from Walmart. On Halloween night, they placed Imani's body into the trash can, using duct tape to compress her rigid frame due to rigor mortis. They transported the can to a secluded area, added charcoal, doused Imani's body with lighter fluid, and set it ablaze. After approximately 5 minutes, realizing the body would not reduce to ash, they extinguished the fire and returned home with the remains. The following day, Iman confided in a friend about the events, encouraged to contact authorities. In November 2, 2013, at approximately 3:43 a.m., Iman Moss dialed 911 from his apartment in Lawrenceville. Sounding distressed, he informed the dispatcher that he was suicidal and that his 10-year-old daughter, Imani Moss, had ingested a chemical substance and was deceased. Responding officers from the Gwinnett County Police Department arrived promptly at the scene. Iman directed them to a trash can located in a recreation area of the apartment complex. Inside, they discovered a small, badly burned body, later identified as Imani. The immediate circumstances raised suspicions among the authorities. Iman's account of Imani's death due to chemical ingestion seemed inconsistent with the condition of her remains. Detectives noted that the body appeared emaciated, indicating possible prolonged neglect or abuse. As investigators delved deeper, they uncovered alarming details about the Moss household. The apartment was found in a state of disarray, with unsanitary conditions prevailing. Notably, the refrigerator was devoid of food, raising concerns about the family's living conditions and the care provided to the children. Iman's initial statements to the police were fraught with inconsistencies. He claimed that Imani had been ill and died naturally, but this narrative conflicted with the physical evidence. Under further questioning, Iman admitted that his wife, Tiffany Moss, had been responsible for disciplining Imani and had restricted her food intake as a form of punishment. The investigation also revealed a troubling history of abuse and prior interventions. In 2010, Tiffany was arrested and charged with first-degree child cruelty after Imani's school reported signs of physical abuse. Despite this, Imani remained in the household, highlighting potential lapses in the child protective system. The tragic death of Imani Moss shed light on systemic failures and prompted a re-evaluation of child protective services in Georgia, aiming to prevent such a heartbreaking incident from recurring. In the wake of Imani Moss's tragic death, the investigation intensified, placing immense pressure on her father. Initially, Iman attempted to mislead authorities by claiming that Imani had ingested chemicals, resulting in her death. However, as inconsistencies in his account emerged and evidence mounted, Iman ultimately broke down and confessed to his involvement in the harrowing events leading to his daughter's demise. Iman admitted that his wife, Tiffany, was the primary abuser, systematically starving Imani over several weeks. He portrayed himself as a passive observer, claiming he was too intimidated by Tiffany to intervene effectively. Iman recounted how Tiffany would inform him of Imani's alleged misbehavior during his long work hours, detailing incidents where Imani was punished for actions such as defecating on walls or mixing feces into her food. These reports from Tiffany painted a picture of escalating disciplinary measures that Iman failed to challenge. Despite recognizing the severity of Imani's suffering, Iman confessed that he felt helpless and did not take decisive action to protect his daughter. He described instances where he attempted to feed Imani protein drinks upon returning home late at night, but these efforts were insufficient to counteract the prolonged deprivation imposed by Tiffany. Iman's inaction and failure to seek external assistance contributed significantly to the tragic outcome. The most disturbing aspect of Iman's confession detailed the couple's attempt to conceal Imani's death. After discovering Imani unresponsive, Iman and Tiffany decided against notifying authorities, fearing the repercussions. Instead, they devised a plan to dispose of her body. Iman's confession illuminated the depth of neglect and abuse Imani endured and highlighted his complicity in the cover-up. His admissions provided crucial insights into the dynamics within the household, the extent of Tiffany's cruelty, and his own failure as a father to protect his child. This revelation not only shocked the community, but also underscored systemic failures that allowed such a tragedy to unfold unchecked. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a capital trial, Iman chose to plead guilty in 2015 to charges including felony murder and concealing a death. This plea deal allowed him to avoid the death penalty. Instead, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As part of the agreement, Iman testified against Tiffany during her trial, providing crucial insights into the abuse and neglect that Imani suffered. Tiffany Moss's trial commenced in April 2019. In a rare and perplexing decision, Tiffany elected to represent herself, declining the assistance of court-appointed attorneys. Throughout the proceedings, she remained notably passive. She did not deliver an opening statement, cross-examine witnesses, or present any form of defense. This lack of engagement left the prosecution's compelling and distressing evidence unchallenged. The prosecution presented a harrowing narrative of prolonged abuse, detailing how Tiffany systematically starved Imani over several months, leading to her death. They also illuminated the subsequent attempt to dispose of Imani's body by burning it in a trash can. The evidence included testimonies from family members, educators, and medical professionals, all painting a grim picture of the suffering Imani endured. After deliberating for less than 3 hours, the jury found Tiffany guilty on all counts, including malice murder, felony murder, first-degree cruelty to children, and concealing the death of another. During the sentencing phase, Tiffany continued her silent approach, offering no mitigating evidence or statements in her defense. The jury ultimately recommended the death penalty, a sentence that the presiding judge formalized on May 1, 2019. Tiffany Moss's death sentence marked a significant moment in Georgia's legal history. She became the first woman in the state to be sentenced to death in over 5 years, and is currently the only female inmate on Georgia's death row. Her case stands as one of the rare instances where a woman has received the death penalty in Georgia, highlighting the severity and brutality of her crimes. This case not only brought to light the tragic failures within the Moss family, but also underscored systemic issues within child protective services, prompting discussions and calls for reforms to better safeguard vulnerable children in the future. Imani's case was marred by multiple missed opportunities for intervention by the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services, DFCS. Records reveal that DFCS had at least 6 prior interactions or complaints involving Imani dating back to 2003, with the most recent occurring just 2 months before her death. Despite these red flags, DFCS failed to take decisive action to protect her. In one glaring instance, a report in 2012 indicated that Imani had been beaten with a belt. DFCS dismissed this report without sending caseworkers to interview Imani, examine her injuries, or question her parents. The agency's failure to conduct a thorough investigation, despite Imani's known history of abuse, underscores critical lapses in their protective mandate. Site Turn Zero Search for Imani's death ignited widespread public outrage and intensified scrutiny of Georgia's child welfare system. The community demanded accountability and systemic changes to prevent similar tragedies. In response, Georgia lawmakers faced mounting pressure to strengthen child welfare laws and improve DFCS operations. This led to the commissioning of the Child Welfare Reform Council by Governor Nathan Deal, which released recommendations in January 2015 aimed at overhauling the state's child welfare practices. Following Imani's death, DFCS implemented several reforms, including conducting deeper investigations into abuse allegations, modifying procedures for assembling maltreatment reports, hiring new case managers and supervisors to reduce caseloads, and ensuring that no case is assigned a lower priority status until a caseworker meets the allegedly abused child. Despite these efforts, challenges persist. Between January 2013 and August 2018, more than 800 DFCS employees assigned to Child Protective Services were disciplined for policy violations, indicating ongoing issues within the agency. In 2018, Imani's grandmother filed a lawsuit against DFCS, arguing that caseworkers were aware of the deteriorating conditions and abuse in the Moss household and failed to act. The lawsuit seeks accountability for the agency's negligence and aims to prevent future failures in child protection. Supporting child welfare organizations is crucial. By contributing our time, resources, or skills, we can aid those dedicated to protecting children and preventing abuse. If you suspect a child is being abused or neglected, it's imperative to contact local child protective services. In the United States, you can also call the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-422-4453, available 24/7. Engaging with legislative efforts aimed at enhancing child welfare laws is also vital. Staying informed about policy changes and supporting initiatives that prioritize children's safety and well-being can lead to systemic improvements. By speaking up and taking action, we can be the voice for children like Imani, who never had one. Together, let's work towards a future where every child is safe, valued, and protected. How does a playful, bright-eyed 3-year-old girl end up the victim of a brutal crime, inside what should have been the safety of her own home? Natalie Leah Miller was just 3 years old when her life was cut short in a way no child should ever experience. Born in California's Central Valley, she was the kind of child who left smiles in her wake, curious, energetic, and full of warmth. She loved to play, to explore, and to make people laugh. But behind that innocence was a home life teetering on instability, where love and danger lived side by side. In March of 2009, Natalie's world came to a violent end. Emergency responders were called to the home she shared with her mother and her mother's boyfriend, only to find the toddler unresponsive, her body marked by injuries that told a story no child should ever have to endure. The explanation offered was simple, too simple. But the truth, as investigators would soon learn, was anything but. At first, it looked like a tragic accident. A fall, perhaps. Maybe a medical emergency. But the autopsy revealed a different story, one written in bruises, fractures, and blunt force trauma. A story that pointed to something far more sinister. And as authorities began to unravel what really happened behind closed doors, they found themselves facing a disturbing truth. The people entrusted with Natalie's safety may have been the very ones who failed her the most. This isn't just a story about a crime. It's a story about overlooked warnings, blurred responsibility, and a community forced to ask how this could have happened, and why no one stopped it in time. What really happened to Natalie Miller? And who, ultimately, was responsible? That's exactly what we are here to unravel today. Natalie Miller was more than just a name on a case file. She was a daughter, a granddaughter, a niece. A tiny spark of life who lit up the room wherever she went. Born in the quiet city of Visalia, California, she lived in a neighborhood that felt safe. One where families kept to themselves, and trouble wasn't something people expected just a few houses down. On the outside, everything appeared normal. But normal can be a disguise. And behind that peaceful setting, something deeply troubling was unfolding. At the center of her home life was her mother, Nicole Lee, a woman navigating the challenges of young motherhood, personal struggles, and complicated relationships. Nicole's relationship with Ryan Jones would prove to be the most fateful decision of all. He wasn't Natalie's father, but he quickly became a constant presence in their lives. To some, he was quiet and unassuming. To others, there was something harder to define, a discomfort, a sense that something wasn't quite right. As the months passed, cracks began to form in the image of a stable home. The signs were subtle but present. Missed medical appointments, unexplained bruises, behavioral shifts. Some relatives noticed the changes, but were met with vague explanations or shut out altogether. There were rumors of tension, whispers of CPS involvement, but nothing that ever sparked immediate alarm. And in cases like this, where danger creeps in slowly, the silence can be just as harmful as the violence that follows. It was an ordinary morning in March 2009 in the Central Valley city of Visalia. Nothing in the stillness of the neighborhood hinted that something unimaginable was unfolding behind the walls of a small home. The call to 911 came suddenly, urgent, panicked. A child was unresponsive, barely breathing. Paramedics rushed to the scene, unaware they were about to encounter one of the most disturbing cases they'd ever face. 3-year-old Natalie Miller was found unconscious, her small body limp, her breathing shallow. The man present with her, Ryan Jones, told first responders that she had fallen, that she had hurt herself while playing. It was a story simple enough to believe in the chaos of the moment. But as emergency personnel assessed her condition, doubt began to settle in. The injuries they observed didn't align with a minor fall or a child's misstep. Natalie was quickly transported to the hospital. Despite frantic efforts to save her, she was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. What followed was a wave of confusion and disbelief. How could a child, seemingly healthy just hours earlier, suffer such devastating injuries? Doctors noted severe internal trauma, deep bruising, ruptured organs, and signs of impact too forceful to be caused by an accidental fall. It wasn't just one injury. It was many, and it told a story that no one wanted to believe. As medical examiners began their analysis, the truth became harder to ignore. Natalie's body bore evidence of blunt force trauma, extensive internal bleeding, damaged tissue, and marks indicating repeated force. These weren't the result of a single moment. They pointed to something prolonged, something deliberate. The official account was unraveling fast, and investigators knew they were dealing with something far more serious. Ryan Jones, the only adult with Natalie that day, maintained that her injuries were the result of an accident. He said she'd fallen, that she'd gotten hurt, and he hadn't realized how badly. But the autopsy results cast immediate doubt on his version of events. The pathologist concluded that the trauma inflicted was non-accidental in nature, a term that carries heavy weight in cases involving children. This wasn't a fall. This was abuse. Authorities now faced a delicate situation. Emotions were running high. Family members were in shock, mourning the loss of a child who'd just barely begun her life. But beneath the grief, suspicion was taking root. The story didn't fit. The injuries didn't lie, and the man at the center of it all wasn't making sense. In those early hours, there were more questions than answers. Why had no one seen this coming? What really happened in the moments leading up to the emergency call? And most disturbingly, how long had it been going on? Detectives began retracing Natalie's final day. Interviews were conducted. The home was examined. Ryan's behavior was scrutinized. Nicole Lee, Natalie's mother, arrived on the scene not long after and was quickly drawn into the investigation. She, too, had questions to answer. Why had she left her daughter in Jones's care? Had there been any warning signs? And if so, why weren't they acted on? Investigators were now forced to dig deeper, to go beyond the stories being told and uncover the pattern hidden in plain sight. What they would find in the coming days would not only confirm their worst fears, but expose a chain of failures that allowed a dangerous situation to spiral into the unthinkable. From the moment Natalie Miller's death was ruled suspicious, detectives found themselves stepping into a web of contradictions. What began as a child fatality case had now become a homicide investigation, and the pressure to uncover the truth mounted quickly. But clarity would not come easily. The early days of the investigation were clouded with conflicting accounts, incomplete records, and people unwilling or unable to tell the whole story. Ryan Jones was questioned immediately. His version of events was vague, shifting slightly with each retelling. Investigators noted inconsistencies in his timeline, hesitations in his answers, and an unusual lack of urgency in how he described the situation. He claimed he had done nothing wrong, that whatever had happened to Natalie must have been accidental. But the evidence was already working against him. Nicole Lee complicated the investigation even further. When questioned, she appeared shaken, overwhelmed, but also strangely defensive. Rather than placing blame or demanding answers, she seemed determined to shield Ryan from scrutiny. She told investigators he was a good man, that he loved Natalie, that he could never have harmed her. But as officers dug deeper, that loyalty began to raise serious concerns. It wasn't just Nicole's words that raised red flags, it was her omissions. She failed to mention prior incidents that pointed to instability in the home. There were missed doctor's appointments, unexplained injuries from weeks prior, and reports that had never been followed up. Child Protective Services had been contacted at least once, but for reasons that remained unclear, the case had never been escalated. Now, detectives were left wondering, had a system built to protect children overlooked a child in crisis? The investigation turned methodical. Detectives pulled medical records and analyzed every emergency room visit. They reviewed old CPS logs, reached out to neighbors, and interviewed family members who had seen signs of trouble but never fully understood the danger. In nearly every conversation, the same theme kept surfacing. Something about the household felt off, but no one could say exactly what. It had always been just beneath the surface, subtle, silent, but there. As police continued their work, rumors began to swirl through the community. Some believed Ryan had a history of violence that had gone unreported. Others whispered about neglect, about tension between Nicole and her family, about warnings ignored. Still, others suggested that maybe Natalie's death was the result of something even more complicated, perhaps not just a crime of violence, but a failure of everyone around her to act when it mattered most. At this point, law enforcement wasn't ready to make any arrests. They didn't yet have the full picture. But one thing was certain: the story being told by the adults in Natalie's life didn't line up with the evidence. And with every day that passed, the truth felt closer, but just out of reach. The case took a decisive turn when the full autopsy report landed on the investigators' desks. Up to this point, the investigation had been marked by questions, confusion clouded by inconsistent statements, and vague denials. But now, science was stepping in to cut through the noise. And what it revealed left no room for doubt. The findings were damning. Medical examiners concluded that the injuries Natalie sustained were not compatible with any accidental cause. They weren't the result of a simple fall or a bump against furniture. They were inflicted with significant force that could only come from another person. There were signs of repeated blunt trauma, internal bleeding, and damage consistent with abuse over time. These were not fresh wounds alone. Some had begun to heal, revealing a history of prior harm. Child protection officials were re-interviewed. Their records showed that Natalie's case had brushed the system before. Concerns had been raised, but none had led to intervention. Now, those earlier moments, those small, almost forgotten warnings, took on new weight. One worker recalled a report of bruising that was never medically explained. Another remembered attempts to follow up that fell through when appointments were missed or calls went unreturned. The forensic evidence pointed in one direction, and it stood in stark contrast to the version of events offered by Ryan Jones. His statements, already inconsistent, now collapsed under the weight of physical proof. Investigators began to retrace his steps more aggressively, and a clearer narrative began to emerge. One marked not by an unfortunate accident, but by intentional, sustained violence. The shift in tone was immediate and devastating. What had once been viewed with cautious uncertainty was now seen for what it was: a brutal assault on a defenseless child. And the man who claimed to have cared for her was now at the center of a mounting case, one that was turning from suspicion to certainty. As investigators pushed deeper, the full truth began to take shape, not just through the physical evidence, but through the stories people began to tell once fear started to fade. Interviews with former acquaintances, digital records, and behavioral patterns formed a grim portrait of Ryan Jones. What emerged was not a sudden outburst or a one-time lapse in judgment, but a pattern, consistent, violent, and ultimately fatal. Former partners described Jones as volatile and controlling, prone to sudden rage, especially when confronted or when things didn't go his way. He had no criminal history of physical abuse on paper, but his past relationships suggested emotional manipulation, intimidation, and moments of unexplained aggression. He was the kind of person who operated in the shadows, out of view, behind closed doors, in the safety of silence. And with Natalie, that silence became deadly. Digital forensics added even more weight to the case. Search history from Jones's devices revealed disturbing patterns, terms related to child discipline, physical punishment, and medical symptoms that aligned with internal trauma. Though not direct confessions, these digital breadcrumbs painted a picture of someone who had both the opportunity and the mindset to harm a vulnerable child. As the facts solidified around Jones, attention turned to Nicole Lee, not as the perpetrator, but as the adult who had allowed the danger to grow. She hadn't struck the fatal blow, but her choices, her denial, her refusal to acknowledge the signs, had created the environment where violence could thrive. She had trusted a man who never earned that trust. And worse, she had protected him, even as her daughter suffered. The betrayal ran deep. Natalie needed more than love. She needed action, intervention, safety. Nicole's failure to remove her child from harm, whether out of fear, dependence, or willful ignorance, made her complicit in the tragedy that followed. That complicity wasn't criminal in the same way as Jones's violence, but morally and emotionally, it carried its own devastating weight. The heartbreak in this case wasn't just in what happened, but in how easily it could have been prevented. Two adults had the power to protect a child. One chose violence, the other chose silence. And together, they sealed the fate of a little girl who never had a chance to grow up. As the case moved toward prosecution, the focus shifted from uncovering the truth to demanding justice for Natalie, and for every child whose cries go unheard until it's too late. The courtroom became the stage for a long-awaited confrontation with justice. As the trial of Ryan Jones began, the weight of the evidence was undeniable. He was charged with second-degree murder and assault on a child causing death. The prosecution presented a compelling case, laying out the grisly details of Natalie's injuries, the inconsistencies in Jones's statements, and the pattern of abuse that had been uncovered. Medical experts testified about the severity of the trauma, pointing to the deliberate and sustained nature of the violence. Forensic analysis and digital evidence further solidified the case against him. But it wasn't just the cold facts that filled the courtroom. It was the emotional toll. Natalie's family members, particularly her grandparents, were in attendance every day, their grief palpable. They had witnessed the little girl's life snuffed out in the most violent of ways, and now they were fighting for her memory. The emotional testimonies from family members added a layer of heartache to the proceedings. They described Natalie's infectious smile, her love of life, and the deep pain they felt at losing her so senselessly. The impact on the jury was profound. Many struggled to hold back tears as they listened to the harrowing details of the case. In the end, Ryan Jones was convicted and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The conviction, while bringing some measure of justice, did little to alleviate the pain. The sentence was a bitter reminder of the life that had been stolen, a young child's future never to be realized. Nicole Lee's trial was a different matter. She was charged with felony child endangerment for her role in allowing the environment that enabled the abuse. Her failure to act, to protect her daughter, cost her 8 years in prison. It was a stark contrast to the punishment Jones received. While she had not physically harmed Natalie, her inaction had played a crucial role in allowing the abuse to continue unchecked. The community was divided in their response. Some felt the sentence was too lenient. Others felt it was a necessary step in holding her accountable. Outside the courtroom, the public reaction was swift and intense. The media coverage was dominated by the shocking nature of the case, with headlines about the brutal crime and the system's failure to intervene sooner. But amidst the tragedy, something else began to grow: advocacy. Natalie's extended family became vocal in their quest for justice, using their grief to fuel efforts to raise awareness about child abuse and neglect. Her grandparents, in particular, became tireless advocates, speaking out about the need for better protection for children and for reforms in the child welfare system. Community members rallied behind them, creating a wave of support that grew far beyond Visalia. Every day, countless children are suffering in environments that should offer them love and safety, yet are instead marked by violence, neglect, and fear. As a society, we must stay vigilant. If you suspect a child is in danger, don't turn a blind eye. Report it. Advocate for better systems of child protection. Support organizations working to prevent abuse and offer resources to at-risk families. Sweden is often seen as a haven of safety, a country where violent crime is rare and small communities thrive in peaceful harmony. But on a summer evening in June 2015, that illusion was shattered. In the countryside of Blomberg, a 17-year-old girl named Lisa Holm vanished without a trace. A routine end to her workday at a local cafe turned into a nightmare, one that would grip the nation in fear and disbelief. What happened to Lisa Holm? And how could such horror unfold in a place where danger seemed unthinkable? Welcome to That Police Officer, where real crime meets real experience. Join me as we break down true crime cases with insight from a law enforcement perspective, facts, investigations, and justice. Subscribe for more in-depth true crime analysis. Lisa Holm was the kind of girl who left a lasting impression on everyone she met. At just 17 years old, she was full of life, ambition, and warmth. Growing up in Skövde, Sweden, Lisa was known for her kind heart, bright smile, and unwavering determination. She had dreams for the future, aspirations that stretched far beyond the small town where she lived. To her friends and family, Lisa was more than just a daughter, a sister, or a friend. She was a source of light, someone who carried an infectious optimism wherever she went. That summer in 2015, Lisa had taken a part-time job at Café Blomberg, a cozy little spot nestled in the scenic countryside of western Sweden. The cafe, located near the shores of Lake Vänern, was a popular stop for locals and tourists alike. For Lisa, working at Café Blomberg was more than just a summer job. It was a chance to earn some money while enjoying the simple pleasures of the Swedish countryside. She had a steady routine. She would arrive in the afternoon, serve customers with her usual cheerful demeanor, and close up before heading home on her moped. It was a short ride back to Skövde, and she always kept her parents informed of her whereabouts. On Sunday, June 7th, 2015, Lisa had just finished her shift and was ready to go back home. But she never arrived. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness settled over the quiet village, something unthinkable had happened. Lisa Holm had disappeared. What started as a normal summer evening in a peaceful town was about to unravel into one of Sweden's most shocking criminal investigations. She had spent the afternoon serving customers, chatting with regulars, and preparing the cafe for closing. At 6:23 p.m., she sent a text message to her father, letting him know she was about to leave for home. It was a simple message, the kind she had sent many times before. Lisa's parents expected her to arrive shortly after. The ride back to Skövde was no more than 15 to 20 minutes on her moped. But as the minutes turned to hours with no sign of Lisa, her parents' concern grew into full-blown panic. Repeated calls to her phone went unanswered. Something was wrong. At around 10 p.m., her worried father decided to go to Blomberg himself. When he arrived, what he found made his heart sink. Lisa's moped was parked near the cafe, standing upright as if she had only just stepped away. The keys were still in the ignition, her helmet neatly placed on the seat. But Lisa was nowhere to be found. There was no reason why she would have left her belongings behind voluntarily. News of Lisa's disappearance spread quickly through the community. Within hours, locals had begun searching for her. By midnight, both police and volunteers had scoured the nearby roads, fields, and wooded areas. The sense of urgency was overwhelming. This wasn't a case of a rebellious teenager running away. Lisa was responsible, and she had no history of disappearing without explanation. The first unsettling clue was found near her moped, a black glove that belonged to Lisa. It was lying on the ground, as if it had been dropped in a hurry. This discovery intensified the growing fear that something terrible had happened. The search expanded rapidly, with over 100 volunteers combing through the vast rural landscape of Blomberg. As the hours turned into days, hope began to fade. Authorities launched a full-scale investigation, deploying police dogs, helicopters, and forensic teams. The Holm family pleaded for help from the public, while social media flooded with missing person alerts. The entire country was watching, hoping for a miracle. On June 12th, 5 days after Lisa vanished, search teams stumbled upon something that sent chills through the community. Inside a small, abandoned work shed on the Martorp estate, just a few kilometers from where Lisa disappeared, her lifeless body was found. The news spread like wildfire, and the shock was immediate. The forensic examination would later confirm that Lisa had been bound and strangled, her body hidden away in an attempt to delay discovery. The discovery of Lisa Holmes' body turned a missing persons case into a full-scale homicide investigation. What had begun as a desperate search for a missing teenager had now become a hunt for a killer. From the moment Lisa was reported missing, police did not rule out foul play. The eerie scene, her moped standing untouched, the keys still in the ignition, and her belongings abandoned, suggested that she had been taken against her will. Investigators immediately began questioning people who might have seen Lisa that evening. The first step was to look at those who had regular access to the area. Employees of Café Blomberg, nearby residents, and transient workers from the Martorp estate, located near the crime scene, were among the first to be questioned. Police also examined Lisa's phone records, retracing her last known movements in the hope of uncovering a crucial lead. As the investigation intensified, several men were detained and questioned, but time after time, these leads led nowhere. Each dead and frustrated both authorities and the public. Some locals reported seeing unfamiliar men around the cafe before Lisa's disappearance. These reports led to interrogations of seasonal workers, many of whom came from Lithuania, Poland, and Latvia for temporary labor. Several individuals were brought in for questioning, but none had concrete ties to Lisa's murder. DNA samples were taken from multiple suspects, and background checks were conducted, yet police could not establish a direct link to the crime. The delays in identifying a suspect only deepened the sense of fear and unease in Blomberg. As police worked around the clock, the people of Blomberg came together in an outpouring of grief and solidarity. Candlelight vigils were held in Lisa's honor, with hundreds of residents gathering to mourn and pray for justice. Social media campaigns spread across Sweden, with thousands of people expressing outrage and demanding answers. The Holm family, devastated but determined, pleaded for information, urging anyone who knew anything to come forward. The case had captivated the entire nation, but the police still lacked a clear suspect. However, just as it seemed the investigation might stall, a breakthrough came, one that would change everything. As investigators meticulously combed through the crime scene, they widened their search beyond the immediate area of Lisa's body. Their efforts soon led them to the Martorp estate, a rural property just a short distance from where Lisa had disappeared. The estate housed several seasonal workers, many of whom were employed in nearby agricultural fields. It was an area that had been checked before, but now, with fresh eyes and the knowledge of where Lisa's body had been hidden, authorities paid closer attention. It didn't take long before they found something significant. Lisa's belongings, items that had been missing since her disappearance, were discovered near the estate. Her clothes and other personal effects were hidden in a manner that suggested an attempt to cover up the crime. This immediately shifted suspicion toward those working or residing at Martorp. Investigators now had physical evidence tying Lisa's last moments to the area. As police intensified their efforts at the estate, they encountered something unusual. Certain individuals appeared nervous and defensive, almost as if they were trying to deter the investigation. One worker, in particular, stood out. Nerijus Bilavicius, a 35-year-old Lithuanian national, had been living and working at Martorp. Unlike others, who cooperated and answered questions without hesitation, Bilavicius seemed agitated. His behavior was erratic, and at times, he was even dismissive of the police presence. Even more suspicious was the fact that some of Bilavicius' co-workers seemed reluctant to speak about him. as if they feared what he might do. With mounting suspicion, forensic experts conducted a comprehensive analysis of Lisa's clothing, body, and the crime scene. What they found sealed Bilovis's fate. DNA evidence, perhaps the most irrefutable kind of proof in modern forensic science, linked Narigis Bilovis directly to the crime. His DNA was found on Lisa's clothes and at the location where her body had been hidden. There was no plausible explanation for how his DNA could have ended up there unless he had been directly involved in Lisa's abduction and murder. Moreover, fibers from his clothing matched samples taken from Lisa's remains, further solidifying the case against him. Narigis Bilovis was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping, assaulting, and murdering Lisa Holm. The quiet seasonal worker who had tried to keep a low profile was now at the center of one of Sweden's most horrifying crimes. The tension in Blomberg reached a fever pitch. Why had he done it? How had he chosen Lisa? As the investigation continued and details of the crime emerged, the full extent of the horror was about to be revealed. The nation braced for the upcoming trial, where the prosecution would lay out the shocking truth of what had happened to Lisa Holm. With forensic evidence placing Narigis Bilovis at the scene of the crime. As police analyzed the circumstances of Lisa's abduction and murder, a clear pattern of a sexually motivated crime emerged. There was no indication that Bilovis had known Lisa personally, yet forensic evidence and his digital footprint suggested that his attack was premeditated rather than spontaneous. Forensic evidence pointed to sexual assault, though due to Swedish laws protecting victims' dignity, specific details were not made public. Bilovis's internet history revealed disturbing searches related to violence against women and sexual crimes, indicating a fixation on predatory behavior. Eyewitness accounts and behavioral analysis suggested that he had been watching Lisa for some time. It was possible that he had seen her working at the cafe and fixated on her as a target. When Lisa left after her shift, he intercepted her, overpowering the petite 17-year-old and dragging her to an isolated area. The crime scene indicated a struggle, but against a much stronger and older man, Lisa had no chance. During interrogation, Bilovis denied everything. He claimed he had never seen Lisa Holm before, let alone harmed her. He tried to explain away the DNA evidence by saying that he might have accidentally touched an object Lisa had used, a desperate and implausible excuse. However, as investigators pressed him harder, his story began to fall apart. Under pressure, his contradictions mounted, and his demeanor became increasingly erratic. The forensic results, the discovery of Lisa's belongings near his workplace, and his suspicious behavior left him with nowhere to hide. Although Bilovis never fully confessed, the evidence was so overwhelming that his guilt was undeniable. Swedish prosecutors prepared to take him to trial, where they would expose the full extent of his crime to the world. The trial commenced in late 2015 at the Skaraborg District Court. The prosecution presented a compelling case, meticulously detailing the evidence that linked Bilovis to the crime. Forensic experts testified about the DNA matches found on Lisa's belongings and at the crime scene. Additionally, digital forensics revealed disturbing searches on Bilovis's devices, indicating a premeditated intent. Witnesses, including co-workers and local residents, recounted observations of Bilovis's behavior before and after Lisa's disappearance. Their testimonies painted a picture of a man who had been evasive and exhibited signs of agitation during the search efforts. Throughout the trial, Bilovis maintained his innocence, offering alternative explanations for the evidence against him. However, his defense struggled to provide credible counterarguments to the prosecution's well-substantiated claims. After careful deliberation, the court found Narigis Bilovis guilty of the abduction and murder of Lisa Holm. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, a verdict that resonated deeply with the public's demand for justice. The severity of the sentence underscored the gravity of the crime and the court's commitment to ensuring public safety. For Lisa's family and friends, The journey toward healing was deeply personal and challenging. The trial's conclusion provided a measure of closure, yet the void left by Lisa's absence remained profound. They channeled their pain into advocacy, raising awareness about personal safety and supporting initiatives to protect other young individuals from similar fates. The legacy of Lisa Home became a catalyst for change, prompting nationwide discussions on community vigilance and the importance of safeguarding vulnerable members of society. While the village of Blomberg would never forget the darkness that touched their lives, they emerged with a strengthened bond and a commitment to honor Lisa's memory through unity and proactive efforts. Lisa Home's case serves as a stark reminder of how quickly a peaceful existence can be shattered by senseless violence. Lisa's memory lives on in more than just the hearts of those who knew her. Her family and the people of Blomberg have taken proactive steps to honor her life, ensuring that her story is not just one of tragedy, but also of lasting impact. Her name has become synonymous with the strength of a community unwilling to be defined by fear. Though the pain of her absence remains, her legacy serves as a powerful reminder that even in darkness, unity and perseverance can bring about light. Crimes like this often leave communities shaken, but they also highlight the importance of looking out for one another. Being aware of our surroundings, reporting suspicious activity, and creating a culture of safety can make a difference. Simple actions, such as checking in on friends and family, advocating for better safety measures, and educating young people about personal security, can prevent future tragedies. Lisa Home's story should not be forgotten. It should serve as motivation to remain vigilant, to protect one another, and to ensure that no family has to endure the pain of such an unimaginable loss. By standing together, we can build stronger, safer communities, ones where no one has to fear for their safety.